Hello, everybody. This is Gary Simon, and I'm the Chief Executive of FSN and leader of the Modern Finance Forum on LinkedIn. I would like to warmly welcome all FSN's readers and my LinkedIn connections from around the world to what promises to be a fascinating interview and webinar. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank the sponsor of today's webinar, which is Jedox, a leader in enterprise performance management. Now, accurate forecasts and the ability to look out further into the future are, of course, the bedrock of the modern FP&A role. But certainty in forecasting is about setting the right technical foundations. Once these fundamentals are in place, organizations can take advantage of artificial intelligence or AI to catapult predictive capabilities to the next level. To help me discuss this, I'm delighted to welcome Flora Selkirk, Head of Financial Planning and Analysis at Apex Hotels, and I can tell you, an inspiring modern finance professional. Apex Hotels has 10 properties in its portfolio and is one of the UK's leading operators of 4-star contemporary hotels. Now, Flora has been trialing state-of-the-art AI capability with very promising results. We're going to learn how she hopes to transform the forecasting process using AI and also hear about her personal data journey. For example, how her role has shifted from traditional FP&A to leading-edge data analytics. Flora, welcome to this session.
Yeah, thanks, Gary, and thank you for inviting me today. Delighted to join you and share a bit of our story with everyone.
Pleasure. Flora, let's start by setting the scene. Planning, budgeting and forecasting has been challenging for everyone over the last 14 months, but I can only imagine the extreme pressure and challenges in the hotel industry. How has your investment in a modern specialized planning, budgeting and forecasting tools such as Jedox allowed you to remain in control?
Yeah, I'm sure it's no surprise to anyone that the last 14 months or so have been very challenging for us, but actually it's been a really interesting time to work in finance, and certainly the focus of my role has shifted quite a lot, and I've spent a lot more time on the forecasting and looking at different scenarios. And having a tool like Jedox on hand to support that has been really, really helpful. And I think the key thing about Jedox is the integration with Excel. So where if I was in normal times, I would build a model that I would plan to reuse. Actually, in the pandemic, we were faced with an emergency situation where we needed new models quickly. And actually being able to pull out all of our history from Jedox, and we've got 10 years worth of history in our financials, but also our KPIs, then to bring those into Excel and use them with drivers for my forecasting models that I was putting together, with all the benefits of Excel and doing that quickly, but also then being able to really easily load that back into Jedox so that I had the ability to compare forecast versions and take snapshots and see how the forecasts were changing. And then, of course, as the actual results came through, see how the forecast compared and how the accuracy was. So yeah, that's Jedox really helps me with all of that through that process.
I think you put your finger on the button, literally, for the ability to change everything quickly was just impossible in spreadsheets. People often had to start again. So that is one of the big benefits that people have realized from their experience in the pandemic. Of course, hotels have access to a wide variety of data sources, both financial and non-financial. And you also have to marshal relatively high data volumes of very granular data. What steps have been put in place to enable complete mastery of your data?
Yeah, so a lot of the data that we have in Jedox is our financial data, but we have also built out our balanced scorecard, so we can load in those non-financial KPIs and load in that data. And that's been really helpful for our operations, just to see at a glance in one place their performance across a number of measures. But what we've also been working on, and particularly this year, I've been focusing on a new project to implement ClickSense, which is a business intelligence tool. And that project is all about bringing in data from all areas of the business, so not just finance, but our sales data, our marketing data, HR data on training, and being able to define all the relationships between that so that we can start to explore our analysis in a new way and actually follow. So when we have a question and we find the answer, we can actually then go on to our next question and follow that through the data. And the benefit of ClickSense for that, I think, will be being able to load in transaction level data and perform that analysis in more detail. So that will be a really big step forward for us. But also what we've been working on and what my focus is on our data strategy as a business, and in particular our data governance strategy, because of course the quality of our analytics will only ever be as good as the quality of the data that we're putting in. And what data governance will help us with is actually going back to source and the underlying processes throughout our whole data lifecycle, and how we're creating and updating and maintaining that data. And that's how I really see us getting to that master level of analytics, where we're focusing right from the starting point through to analytics. So that's been a really excited project to get started with, and through the rest of the year I'll be working on that.
It's so important, Flora. I mean, our research shows that about 19% of organisations in total claim to be data masters. So it's great to hear that you're up there. But it's so crucial to deal with that lumpy, irregular data, the non-financial data that you want to bring into forecasts. And frankly, a lot of the insights, and particularly being able to look out further into the distance, comes from non-financial data. Actually, it doesn't always come from the financial data. So yeah, I'm glad you're putting your arms around the data and implementing good governance around it. We're going to get onto the AI aspects very soon, but how often do you reforecast the business, and what accounting techniques do you employ? For example, rolling forecast, scenario planning, etc.
Yeah, so our commercial and events team have always prepared revenue forecasts every week. But in finance, we focus mostly on our monthly kind of cash flow forecasts for the bank historically. But even before the pandemic, in the past 2 or 3 years, we were finding it increasingly difficult to budget 15 months ahead, which we were doing for the latter half of the year. So there's been a growing appetite in the business to implement rolling forecasts, and I think COVID has only added to that, because at times it's been difficult to forecast next week, let alone that far out. So we're moving to a quarterly reforecasting process. And the plan is to do that on a rolling basis. So we're always forecasting out our next 4 quarters and focusing on the detail in particular in the quarter that's coming. But that's challenging for us. I think as a hospitality business, we do budget and forecast in a lot of detail. And obviously what we don't want to do is to spend a lot of time on these quarterly reforecasts and basically multiply up our budgeting process 4 times. So I think how I'll manage that and the techniques that we're planning to deploy are leveraging the budgeting models that we already have in Jedox and adapting those so they can be used for rolling forecasts. So, for example, some of those are driver based, so we can set a cost as percentage of revenue or £1 per room sold. And if we change revenue, all of that cost will just calculate through itself. Payroll model is headcount based, so we can just change, add in vacancies and adapt that. And we have project models as well. So as we're creating a list of projects, that's inputting into Jedox, and then we can go through and approve and reject those projects, and that will determine whether or not it will feed into our budget or our forecast. And these are all things that we can, of course, just roll forward quarter to quarter. And I think that's how we'll get more agile. And I think for me, I want to be able to pre-populate as much of those forecasts as possible using Jedox, so that we're only going in and making changes by exception where there is a tangible change in the business that we need to respond to. And that, again, is something that Jedox will help us to achieve.
Yeah, it's interesting because, again, you seem to read my mind, but the rolling forecast piece is what's come out of our most recent research is crucial for agility. I mean, it improves accuracy, it improves speed, but it actually, where it's distinctive as an accounting technique, is it improves agility, the ability to change in response to market changes. And if nothing's changed, you don't have to change it, of course. Which brings me quite neatly into the sort of agility that a specialized planning, budgeting and forecasting tool like Jedox gives you. I mean, how has it enabled you to respond to a very intense and variable competitive landscape?
Yeah, so I think there's a few things to mention there, and I think the first kind of key one is that actually our management accounts and our daily reporting all prepares itself. We don't need to do any work to prepare those reports now because it's all set up. And with the daily figures, you know, that's so important for the commercial team because they're using that information to set their pricing and to look at their strategies. So the fact that that's there for them when they come to work in the morning already really helps them to spend their time on making those decisions. And within finance, again, when the financial reporting team are reviewing the management accounts, they're focusing on the review and the analysis and commenting. They don't need to spend time on report preparation, which then, of course, frees up more time to spend on the more value-adding things. And that also applies in our planning, budgeting, and forecasting as well. So as people make changes to their budgets and forecasts, that is immediately consolidating into our group. And again, we don't need to do any work to do consolidations because those hierarchies are already set up within Jedox, and we can still add in version control and take snapshots and lock it down to manage it. But all of that again just helps the process be more agile. And there's a couple of other things I think as well, actually things that we take for granted now, and it's only when you actually go and review other options and see that some of these things are quite challenging. But for example, being able to compare data that's in different granularities, so your budget will be less detailed than your actuals, and actually just being able to see that side by side and look at the variances is really easy in Jedox. And similarly, KPI calculations. So if we add a new snapshot of our budget and forecast, you don't need to then go and add all your KPI calculations for that new version. The calculations that you've already set up will work. So yeah, all of these things really make that quite quick to then see the impact of any changes that you're putting through, and that's kind of just bread and butter stuff in Jedox, to be honest.
But it's automation, isn't it? It's actually taking a lot of the drudgery out of the forecasting process. Just on a point of information, do you bring your actuals? I think you use Sage. Do you bring your actuals into the Jedox system? Is that where you bring actuals and budgets together?
We do, yeah. So we have a live query into Sage that refreshes every 3 hours. That's how we've set it. So yeah, and we can do it manually at any time as well. So yeah, that's always updating.
Brilliant. Okay. So let's get into the meat, as it were. Sorry to vegetarians, of this discussion, because you know, I know a passion of yours has been to improve the predictive capabilities of forecasting by moving to next generation artificial intelligence. And there are an awful lot of people on this call who really haven't yet done anything in this area. So let's start. Tell me about the scope of this initiative and the progress that you've made.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's really Jedox that drew me towards the artificial intelligence. I saw Martin Overton, who's principal consultant for Jedox in the UK, present the AI-assisted planning model at the CFMS and Jedox annual conference in the Tower of London. And I approached Martin after that presentation and said, actually, I think as a business, we have a lot of data that will be really good for this model. And that's our data, that's our business on the book. So every day we're capturing what our future bookings are, and we can see how that builds up over time. So intuitively, if we've got all that data, we expected that the AI model should deliver some good results. So we spoke about it, and I was delighted that Jedox decided to take us on as a pilot case study, because it was a really great opportunity to work with their development team who are based in Freiburg in Germany, and work on that together. And then of course we're developing something that's bespoke for our business. So that was really good. But the kind of scope that we set for that was we wanted to look at room revenue, because that's where we had a lot of data already captured in Jedox, and specifically looking at forecasting our occupancy, so how many room nights we expect to sell, and then our room rate, and that builds up the room revenue that we would forecast. And the objectives that we set for the pilot were around accuracy. So we wanted to see if we could at least get the AI forecasting as accurately as we were doing manually. And our own target for that is within a 3% variance on revenue. So we set that. We looked at a 4-month outlook because that's what we do manually. So see again, Jedox to match the process. And for bonus points, I said, well, actually, can the AI take another step forward, and could it forecast our room revenue by different market segmentations and different booking channels? Because that's where it gets too time consuming for us to do manually, but actually really valuable if we can have some useful information on that. So through 2019, we worked on the pilot and building up a model for the AI. And we were kind of ready to go live with that at the beginning of 2020. However, that is kind of start of the year is always when I focus on budget, so I was a little bit distracted. And then, unfortunately, of course, as we all know, COVID happened, and that's where we got to with it.
So, okay, I don't understand this stuff at all. You're going to need to explain it basically to me. So, okay, you build an AI capability with Jedox in Germany. What does that actually, in nuts and bolts terms, mean to the finance people listening to this call? What do you actually do?
Yeah, so the model that we built is driver based. So the key thing was thinking about what drives our room revenue. What rules can we set that would help to predict that? And then that is fed into a Jedox cloud service that has different algorithms set up. And actually part of the work that the Jedox team did on the pilot was to trial different algorithms. And the model that we have actually can run, I think, seven different algorithms, and it will tell us which it thinks is the best outcome. But we can also decide differently and say, no, actually, we want the random forest one rather than another one. So
okay. All right, so you've got these 7 different algorithms. That still doesn't mean anything to me. What are different algorithms? What does that mean?
yeah, and to be honest, to an extent, I trust those algorithms to deliver the results. So what I focus on is what I'm putting into the model. And what we wanted to put in was things like, what's important for us is a simple time series forecast wouldn't work because our business is too seasonal and there's too many specific events that happen that would influence revenue, and those events might change year to year. So for example, take Easter as an example. Easter's on different dates every year. So we need to be able to tell that machine learning capability that you need to know when those dates are. So these are the things that we worked on to feed into the model as drivers. So matching day of the week as well. So actually today's the 8th of June. We wouldn't compare the 8th of June 21 to the 8th of June 2020. We'd actually compare the Tuesday to which would have been Tuesday the 9th of June 2020. So again, we need to tell that difference because obviously people choose to stay based on days of the week. And other events that were going on as well. So for example, in Edinburgh, if there's a Six Nations rugby match on, we know that we'll be really busy. And there might be other events that have some impact, but maybe a lesser impact. So we also wanted to feed in a 3-tiered driver where we could say this is a high impact event, a medium impact event, or a low impact event. And again, so what we were focusing on in the development I worked on was just setting all of these drivers. So, defining these data points and just defining by date. And then, to be honest, as a finance person, trusting that upload into the AI services, and then magic happens, and then I get my results and my predictions back from it.
Right. So it's a bit of a black box, isn't it? The algorithms and the way those are written. And are those algorithms constantly reusable, or do you have to change them from time to time?
Again, with Jedox, that's a managed service, so it's almost like a software as a service that we would use. And what we did, because obviously, as you say, it is a little bit of a black box. When we were piloting the test, we took ourselves back in time a little bit. So we ran slightly older data so that we can compare it to our actual results that had already happened. So that allowed us to see how good the results really were. And actually, it was interesting. I mean, even the first iteration that we did, I remember how excited the Jedox team were, because a lot of the results were good. We could see certain dates where it wasn't right. But some of the results were very promising. And then as we went through iterations, each time we added in a new driver, and we did do that iteratively, so we could see the impact of each new one that we added. We could see those results improve. And we still, I think, when we ended the pilot, we certainly, as a proof of concept, I think we were there with it. We could see that a lot of the results were hitting the objectives that we set. And actually, I think certain dates where they weren't, it was our homework as a business, and it was going back to that events calendar. I think we needed to spend a little bit more time on categorizing those events that were on locally to each property into the high, medium, and low categories, because we could see that was influencing. So yeah, again, it was really interesting to work through all that and see those results come through.
So you got some pretty good results. I mean, one of the things that came out of what we discussed a little bit earlier is you had lots of data, lots of historic data, which obviously gave the opportunity to compare, but also in terms of machine learning and improving the accuracy of the forecast that you get through AI. The amount of data, historic data you have, is quite important, isn't it? I mean, just give me a sense of that, Flora.
Yeah, I think when we did tests, we really need to look at a 3-year period at least to get good accurate results, and we've got kind of 5 years of really quite detailed room revenue data, so we had that. But also, we didn't want to feed in absolutely all of our data to the machine learning every time, because that would actually take a lot of time just to crunch the numbers. So another thing that we focused on was picking out the right data points, maybe not business on the books every single day for 365 days, but actually how many data points do we need to take just to tell the machine learning algorithms enough that it can get accuracy in that prediction, but it doesn't take 24 hours to calculate. So that was another thing that we worked on.
So a couple of human issues come out of this. I mean, one is your level of trust in the outcome. And obviously, at some stage, you're going to have to convince the rest of the business that, switch off the old way of forecasting. We're moving to AI-driven forecasting. What are some of the issues in doing that? How are you going to manage that shift in mindset?
Yeah, I think any kind of change is obviously people get nervous, particularly, our forecasts are very important for our revenue team in making those pricing decisions. So for them to be able to trust a number that's come from an algorithm in the cloud, that is a challenge. And they've trialed, for example, revenue management systems in the past, which are systems hospitality businesses can use to use artificial intelligence to tell you what pricing you should be setting, and we've taken those back out because actually we didn't find a solution that was better than what we were doing. But I think my approach to that is we were always planning to implement the AI predictions in parallel with our existing process initially. But what that would do would be to give us a benchmark for our forecast. So if there was a particular difference between the AI prediction and the forecast that we prepared manually, we could begin to challenge that and say, well, is the AI seeing either an opportunity that we've not missed and we can push our rates, or actually is it giving us an early warning flag that we've not picked up on and maybe we need to take action to hit the numbers now? Or equally, of course, maybe the AI's missed something and that's a new driver that we can go back and build. And I think we'd really need to spend at least a year through that parallel process, because we're such a seasonal business. I think to build that trust, we'd need to test the predictions through the year. And where I'd like to get to, I think, is that at least that prediction becomes the first step. So it might be that we always go and make some tweaks and changes where it's difficult to quantify something that we know intuitively about the forecast, but that would still save quite a lot of time and again make that process a lot more agile and efficient. And if we can get to a point where we completely make that old manual process redundant and rely on the AI, great. But even if we don't, I think there's still a lot of value in just having that benchmark and having that starting point for our forecasting processes.
And when will you sort of wean yourself off Jedox team in Germany? I mean, when will you feel confident to be completely independent in your AI predicted forecasts without their support?
Yeah, so the pilot had actually ended at the end of 2019, and we were just kind of taking that step into it. And I'd had some training from the Jedox team because I think the model that we built was quite technical. I think that going forwards, taking it to market, Jedox are planning to put a wizard in front of it so that it's more accessible for finance people. Actually, because I've used Jedox for so long, I kind of know some of the script that works in the background. Anyway. Sorry, Gary, I've forgotten the question that you asked.
It was really just a question of, if you've got the team in Germany, when can you switch them off and carry on under your own steam, as it were? And I think you sort of answered it. I'm extremely envious of what you've done because I'd love to play with this stuff. Never had the opportunity in my career to do it, and it is very, very exciting. Just to sort of finish off with a little bit, how have you changed? How's your role changed? How have your skills changed through this? And what do you see yourself doing with it?
Yes, my role is actually about to change to head of data analytics. And what that will allow me to do is to focus on delivering that data strategy and help us treat our data as a strategic business asset. So obviously our hotels are tangible assets that have value, but actually I see so much value in our data as well. And by focusing on improving our data and improving our analytics, of course, I hope that we can become more data driven and make better decisions and improve our business performance through that. So yeah, I've worked with our data for over 5 years now, and I see all the potential in that. So that's my passion now, really, to bring that to the business. And I think that data governance piece of that strategy, that's the foundation for predictive analytics. So we've got quite good data for room revenue, but putting data governance across other data will get us to that next level where we can expand how we use the predictive capabilities.
When I started in accounting, and we both came, from Deloitte, the old partner looked after me and said, "Oh, you don't want to adulterate your good qualifications with anything else." I violently disagree with that now. I mean, it strikes me that, or are you going to take on your skills into formal data science qualifications? Do you see yourself adding to that? Because there are a few accountants out there who are, doing data science degrees or extra qualifications of some sort.
Yeah, I certainly find it interesting, and I'm looking to kind of upskill myself as well and do some learning, particularly on the data management side initially. But equally, I'm building my team at Apex, so I'm actually bringing in a developer who will have some of that technical skill and can do some of that work. So yeah, I'm not sure. I think I'll see where the journey takes me, to be honest, and always open to learning new things. So yeah, it'd be interesting to see where that goes.
I didn't expect you to declare publicly what your career plans are, but okay, just in the last minute, what are the next steps? What are you hoping to do next year and the year after?
Yes, I think the things we've touched on, obviously we've got the rolling forecast to roll out, and we've got the AI models to get back up and running. We've got ClickSense to roll out, and then I've got data governance. So actually, yeah, that's more than enough to keep me busy over the coming months, I think. And yeah, it's actually, in what's been quite adverse times, actually, yeah, it's an exciting time to work in the business.
Flora, unbelievably, of course, half an hour's flown by. I've been enthralled by your description of what you've done. I'm sure other people will be totally impressed and overawed by the scope of what you've achieved in difficult circumstances. Shame COVID got in the way, but I'd love to talk to you in a year's time, post-COVID, hopefully we're through it. To see what you're doing with it next. But thank you for sharing so enthusiastically what you've done with Jedox. It is an amazing project. It's real. you've actually done it. We're not just talking about it. And I think a lot of people will have benefited from you sharing your experience today. So thank you so much for joining us. And everybody else, thank you for listening. And I look forward to welcoming you back to another webinar in the future. Thank you.